Now let me introduce Rajiv Gupta, CEO of Skyhigh Networks, who's here to talk about Skyhigh's product vision and share the details of 3 groundbreaking new cloud security technologies.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rajiv Gupta, CEO of Skyhigh Networks. When we started Skyhigh 5 years ago, we set out to address the cloud security problem. In these past 5 years, we've been fortunate to help create a category that analysts call the fastest growing security category ever, CASB, or Cloud Access Security Brokers. What we've done in the meantime in these 5 years is listen to our customers, innovated for our customers, and we continue to do that. And today I'm really excited to share with you 3 key innovations that we think will be game-changing for the cloud security world. But before I do that, let's ask the question of why. Why do we exist? Why do what we do? What is our true north? Our vision is to make cloud the most secure environment for business. Cloud, the most secure environment for business. The reason I repeat that is today, people think of security as the biggest barrier to cloud adoption. We want to make it the biggest driver for cloud adoption. Now let's look at the guidelines that are the guiding principles that are guiding our work. The first is that data is an organization's most valuable asset. Now, the data could be your plans, your processes, your customer data, doesn't matter what. Data is the lifeblood of most organizations. The second is that people do their work when you remove friction. Less friction, more productivity. Keep this in mind. Friction is the anathema of where we're headed. Make sure that anything that we do here removes friction. The third is organizations that leverage cloud accelerate their business. And we've seen that many, many times before. Whether the study shows that you've improved your return on asset, your productivity, your profitability, or created disruptive new businesses, like the Ubers and the Lyfts and the Airbnbs of the world. The last one may be surprising to you, especially the security audience, which is normally we think of the end user as the weakest link in security. But we believe that it doesn't always have to be the case. The end user can be part of the solution, needs to be a part of the solution. The case where all security controls were outside the end user's participation, I think that's long gone. I'll talk more about these. So let's look at a few examples here. AstraZeneca, a world-renowned pharmaceutical company. What they decided was they want to use cloud to enable their researchers, their scientists to come together to collaborate on creating new drugs, so that the impediments of distance and time got out of the way. And they've been very effective at it. So effective that Jeff Haskell, the CISO of AstraZeneca, he won the CSO 50 award on how he's using Skyhigh to enable the use of Box, to enable collaboration to help AstraZeneca be more successful. Caesars Entertainment. Now you think of Caesars Entertainment as a behemoth that's in leisure and gambling and casinos and so on and so forth, and they are. There are more than 50 properties, highly successful. But what's interesting is that about 2 years ago, they did an audit of what is the most valuable asset within Caesars. And I'm sure you won't guess it, but the answer was their data. It is their data on their 55 million users, their transaction history, when the user comes in, a customer comes in, when the customer goes, what the customer does, is their most valuable asset. So here you can see the examples I'm describing here are talking about those guiding principles. The guiding principles where data is valuable, one of the most valuable assets, collaboration enabled by cloud is really what sets companies apart, and removing friction. This third example is the one of removing friction, American Express. So Todd Fennell, the VP of IT, VP of Security IT at American Express, he realized that his developers want to use Slack because it makes them more productive. But the problem was that he needed to make sure that security was addressed in the kinds of requirements that American Express had. And he used Skyhigh to address those security requirements to remove that friction for his employees, for his developers to use Slack. And again, not surprisingly, Todd Fennell won the CSO 50 award this year for how he's enabled American Express to be more successful by removing the friction from his employees. We've been really privileged, and I mean this sincerely, we've been really privileged to have more than 40% of the Fortune 100 leverage Skyhigh to make themselves more productive, to go on this cloud journey. Like I mentioned, we've learned from them. What we've learned has become part of the product, and the innovations I'm going to describe to you today are also from these learnings that we had by working with these large organizations, by working with these leaders in the industry. Now, if you take those guiding principles together, you need to make sure that data is the center of what you do. You need to enable your employees, remove the friction, and leverage cloud as a way to pull this together. This calls for cloud-native data security. Data security that is native to the cloud, that anticipates the usage of the cloud, that anticipates the scale, anticipates the speed requirements of the cloud, the new collaborative use cases of the cloud. It's not simply, you can't simply take your tried and old traditional on-prem systems, bolt them together, create a Frankenstein, put them to the cloud. That's not the answer. This has to be cloud-native, off the cloud, by the cloud, for the cloud. And you'll see this as in all of the innovations described to you in the next few minutes. So what you have here is your users and the data. The data sitting in many cloud services. And what you need is a way to identify where your data is, to classify that data, to figure out what data is really important, to be able to control who has access to the data, to enable that secure collaboration based on policies. And the third one is to protect your data wherever it goes, right? So these are the foundational principles to enable a cloud-native data security model for the cloud world. Okay, so we've pulled this all together into the Skyhigh product that we call the Skyhigh Security Cloud. And I'll be describing to you the 3 innovations that I think that many of the users, many of the customers think are game changers for them as they look to embrace the cloud, as they look to harness the power of cloud. So now let me move to these 3 new capabilities I'm so excited to share with you. The first one is instant response. So this is instant response in a traditional world today, right? The user performs an action. Maybe the user puts a document in a publicly shared folder. There's an event alert that's triggered. Maybe this document shouldn't be there. The alert is sent to a SOC analyst. The SOC analyst then reviews the event. SOC analyst typically doesn't have too much context, has to contact the user. He or she investigates, resolves the event, and the user goes on this way, right? This is how it works today. Well, so far it works approximately all right. The problem is you take this instant response environment into a cloud-based world, and it's mayhem. You have so many incidents that they overflow, they inundate the analyst. There are, on average, 387 incidents, cloud incidents, per analyst. Way too many for any analyst to manage. Way too many for any analyst to do justice to. And what that means is that the analyst now is so busy trying to sift the signal from this noise, they miss the important signals. They miss those cases where they have to do something about it. And consequently, you have the organization have a security breach, and they're on the front page of the New York Times. So the first innovation, the first game-changing innovation, one of 3 today, is autonomous remediation. So let me show you how it works. In this new world, in this cloud-native world, what happens is the end user performs an action, the alert is triggered, the end user is notified in the application, in the context of what's happening. And the user can then take corrective action, and the alert is resolved. Now, there may be some situations where these alerts are high priority that the user cannot resolve, and those are the ones that come to the analyst now. Remember, now the user is part of the resolution process. So what we see is that 97% of all these alerts are resolved by the users themselves. And the upshot of it is that if a user addresses one event a month, just one event a month, it reduces the number of alerts that SOC analysts have to worry about from 387 down to 12. Much more manageable, much easier for the analyst to look for that signal from the noise. Not worry about all of the rest of the alerts which the user themselves can resolve, and just focus on the 12 the user can, or the high severity ones the user can't resolve. Now, the interesting thing that we found working with customers is that this is actually good for the user as well. Because the user can take care of the problem right there and then. The user doesn't have to wait for the analyst to call him up and slap them on the wrist. The user knows what's going on. The user can get the job done and move on. So even though the user has to do one event a month, it's fine, and the user's happy with it. User's happy, the analysts are happy, much more secure environment. This is what cloud native means in an incident response environment. So autonomous remediation addresses cloud scale alert fatigue. If we had alert fatigue in a traditional world, in a cloud world, it's much, much worse. And we need to make sure we design solutions anticipating that are cloud native. The end users resolve 97% of the alerts. The alerts that go to the analysts are 10 times fewer, manageable number, and the SOC analyst can then focus on high severity events. Right? The first innovation that I truly believe is game-changing, autonomous remediation. Let's look at the next one. Email continues to be the killer app, the app that most people use today in how they collaborate, right? And this is just the growth rate of Exchange Online. Now, the way traditional email DLP systems work is that the email goes to the email DLP system. They scan the metadata, the body, the content, any attachments if there are, and then decide whether what should be done about this email. Should it go through the recipient or not? That's fine. That did work, except today what's happening is many of those files are much too large to be sent as an attachment. Well, when there's a problem, there's a solution. And Microsoft and others have done a really good job to create a great solution, very usable solution, where they take the attachment and they put the attachment in OneDrive. And what's in your email is a link to the attachment. So what happens is now the size of the email is reduced because the attachment's in OneDrive, you only have a link to it, so it works very well. But the problem, though, is most traditional email DLP systems, they focus only on the email. They have no way, sitting where they are, to access the attachment, to see if the attachment should be allowed to be shared or not. Cloud breaks traditional email DLP. So our second innovation we're introducing today is cloud email DLP. I'm really excited about this because email, like I showed in the chart today, is exploding. People still use email. People use email more and more to collaborate, to work with their partners, their employees. And if we don't have a way of securing data in this email channel, we are broken. We have to address it. And cloud email DLP is one way to address it. Is the best way that we've seen that our customers find is to address the cloud email problem. So this is how it works. When that attachment is sent to OneDrive, for example, or some other storage service, and what's left is a link to that attachment, Cloud Email DLP scans both. It applies DLP policies on both, not just the body of the email, not just the metadata, but also on that content that's stored in OneDrive. So you have one consistent policy applied on all of the facets in which data is exchanged between person A and person B. But if you look at 365, there are many different properties there, right? There's Exchange, there's SharePoint, there's OneDrive, there's Microsoft Teams, there's Yammer. Now, traditional email DLP solutions work for Exchange. Well, as I mentioned, they don't really work, they barely work, but let's assume they work partly for Exchange. What Skyhigh Email DLP does is it gives you that one consistent policy, the DLP policy, data loss prevention policy, for all of the ways that data may be shared, whether it's through Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, or whatever the case might be. Now, remember when I mentioned earlier that to be cloud native, it has to be designed for the cloud. It's designed for the scale of the cloud. It's designed for the speed of the cloud. It has to be designed for the interaction model of the cloud. Well, another very important for being cloud native is that you have to anticipate that in this cloud world, your employees, your partners are not always using devices you've given them, right? Devices you've given them, let's call them managed, and devices that they are using, maybe their own device that they own, BYOD, or maybe a partner's device, is an unmanaged device from your perspective. So in a cloud-native world, you have to assume that all controls you provide are applied not only to managed devices, but unmanaged devices. You have to assume that when you're talking about email, it applies through all email protocols, not just ActiveSync, but also MAPI and IMAP and so on and so forth. You cannot have any breakage. Friction, as I mentioned, is anathema. Make sure you don't add any friction to how people interact and collaborate. And one aspect of friction is don't require any footprint, any agent on the endpoint, right? So those are other important aspects of being cloud native. So Cloud Email DLP, the second innovation I described to you today, solves the Cloud Email DLP challenge. It applies consistent policy across all of the different ways that data can be exchanged in 365, whether it's Exchange, whether it's OneDrive, whether it's Teams, Yammer. All users, all devices, all client protocols. It's not just a partial solution. And it does not require any agent, any endpoint footprint. No friction whatsoever. Okay? So So far I've described two of the three innovations. So the first is the autonomous remediation, right, which is the incident response workflow in a cloud world. The second is applying DLP to email in a cloud world. One of the ways the data is exchanged is through collaboration means where I'm sharing a link with you. And one of the ways that we traditionally have tried to control that collaboration is by sitting inline. And when I'm sitting inline, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make sure that if the data shouldn't be shared, it's not shared, right? So it is real time, which is really important. Because if that file shouldn't be shared with you, you shouldn't have access to it at all whatsoever. Even before you can open it, you should not get it at all. That's real time, that's wonderful. Email works, inline controls work for real time controls. But the problem is the coverage is limited, right? So they work for the cases where data is being uploaded. They work for the cases where there's a standard app being used to access the data. But if I have data that already exists in the cloud service, there's no way for me to go back and apply controls around it. Data at rest is a problem. When data is being created in the cloud. Now, what's happening today is most of these enterprise services, they're trying to create collaborative environments where we can actually create the content in the service itself, where I'm actually editing a document in a box or in OneDrive. Right? When the content is created in the cloud, the problem is if I'm sitting inline, all I'm seeing is a packet that's going back and forth, a character that's going back and forth, a diff that's going back and forth. There's no way for me to look at understand the context and apply any DLP to it. And the third problem is that some of these applications apply certificate pinning. This is a way to make sure that there's no man-in-the-middle attack, right? And when you apply certificate pinning, you cannot sit inline. You break the application friction, right? So this is how the traditional controls of inline work. There are some positives, which is real time, but there are a bunch of negatives, which is coverage is a problem. The other way that we typically try and apply controls is through an API-based connection, right? I have some of these services provide APIs where I can use APIs to connect with the cloud service. And once I connect with the cloud service, then I can look at existing content as well, right? Data at rest is not a problem. I don't have to worry about sitting in line, so don't worry about certificate pinning or all the complexity of sitting in line. None of those complexities worry me, right? So coverage is 100%. But the one key downside, the one Achilles heel, is it's not real time, right? This is API, this is after the fact. This is asynchronous. This is after the file has been shared that the API tells me the file has been shared. So that after the fact creates what's called an enforcement gap. This gap is the time between the time I share a file and the time the API system lets the control framework know the file has been shared, and the control framework then does something about it. After the file has been shared, the horse has left the barn, right? In most traditional systems today, the enforcement gap is between 5 and 20 minutes. Think about it, right? 5 minutes to 20 minutes is when, after I share a file with you, 5 and 20 minutes later, I might know, the system may know that the file has been shared and tries to do something about it. Now, I don't know, you may wonder, is 5 minutes too much? Is 5 minutes not a problem? Why is 5 minutes such an issue? Well, the reason why it's such an issue is 21% of all the files that are shared are accessed within the first 5 minutes. So 5 minutes is a big deal, right? 5 minutes is when a highly confidential document may have been shared inappropriately, may have left the barn, and now I'm trying to recover it, right? And very often it can't. I've shared it with you, you've shared it with somebody else, it's gone. I've lost control of it. So this enforcement gap is a big Achilles heel in any API-based controls, right? Again, you get the benefit of coverage, but the problem is that it's not real time. So the innovation here is Lightning Link. What Lightning Link does is it is like a mode like the inline or API, except it is effectively real time. What it does for you is that it takes the enforcement gap of 5 minutes, or however long it is, typically 5 to 10 minutes, and it reduces down to 0. Which is, if that file should not be shared, it will not be shared at all. If I try to share the file with you, even before you can get access to it, the sharing will be blocked. So consequently, what you get is you get the benefit of coverage. You can apply this to data at rest, documents that existed. You can apply it to documents that are being created online. You can apply it to applications that do certificate pinning. All of that, all of the benefits of API. So those are the two key benefits of using Lightning Link. So today I've introduced 3 new capabilities that we believe are game changers in cloud security, the game changers enabling enterprises to leverage the power of cloud. Autonomous remediation. This is the case where the incident workflow involves the end user for benefit of the user and the SOC analyst. Is Cloud Email DLP that addresses the email DLP problem for the cloud. And it's Lightning Link that addresses the collaboration control problem for the cloud. So the question you might ask is, when are these available? They're available now. They're part of the Sky Security Cloud that's available today, that's being deployed by many enterprises, seeing some of the benefits that I described to you during the course of this conversation. So just bring it all together. I start off by describing the mission. Our mission is to make sure cloud is the most secure environment for business. I describe the problem statement, which is taking security be the biggest barrier, the biggest driver for cloud adoption. I describe the guiding principles, and describe that to address the guiding principles, the solution needs to be cloud native. You need cloud native data security to make sure that you address the needs of security in a cloud world so enterprises can leverage the power of cloud to accelerate their business. Thank you very much.